Testing, 1, 2. All right. Let's go live. Hey, everybody. Chuck Holton here. Sorry for the wait. I was on a meeting that was going longer than I wanted it to. Wow, we got a lot going on. Prime Minister Netanyahu made a sudden trip to Washington, D.C., and we're going to talk about why. So stick around for that. Also, there was a pretty massive barrage of rockets that came out of Gaza that actually wounded 7 people in Israel. So that's the first time that's happened in a while. And we're going to talk about the details of all that. Also, we're going to talk about the threats that Iran continues to make against the United States and other countries as they are trying to avert a war, try to keep the United States from bombing them. And so that and a whole lot more here. We got a lot to cover today. I just need to take a deep breath because I've been running hard since about 4 o'clock this morning. And wow, there's just so much happening. Uh, Thank you all for watching. I wanted to point out that I am doing, after these lives, I'm recording a 10-minute summary, condensed version of these lives that I'm putting up on YouTube as well. So if you don't have time to watch the entire 1 hour live broadcast, you can watch the summary as well. Coming to you from Starlink, which seems to be kind of glitching a little bit, but there's a whole lot of questions also I notice in the chat here, and I will try to get to some of your questions as best I can. But I want to go through this first and talk about all the things that are happening because there's just a lot going on. Where's my notes here? So to start out, let's start out with the rocket barrage. Hamas fired 10 rockets overnight at Ashkelon and Ashdod, and those are, if you recall, they're cities that are just immediately north of Gaza. The rockets of the 10 rockets that were fired, 5 of them were shot down by the Iron Dome system. 4 more fell in unpopulated areas and didn't hurt anybody, but 1 got through and it struck in a residential area. It blew up a car and damaged some buildings in the area. There were 7 people who reportedly received shrapnel wounds. 1 person had an eye injury. 27 people total were taken to the hospital for evaluation. Some people always get injured running to the shelter, but whatever is the cause of their injuries, 27 people going to the hospital from this is pretty remarkable, at least since like August. It's the first time that they've had a barrage that large, and so been more than 6 months. That's pretty crazy. There were some people that had panic attacks and stuff like that, but hundreds of thousands of people had to run for the shelters. So they were launched from Deir al-Balah, which is in central Gaza, and it's an area that has been pretty much untouched by the war. Deir al-Balah is an area that the IDF has not gone into yet. And you might be surprised to hear that there are places in Gaza where the IDF has not entered, but there are. And this is one of them. Now, they immediately struck the site of the launcher and left a smoking crater where that thing used to be. But they then issued an evacuation order for Deir al-Balah and told everybody to leave, and they're going to have to go in there. There's I think a fair to midland chance that they uncover some hostages in that area. If it's an area that they have not been into at all, there's a very good chance that's an area where some of the hostages are being held. And it would be just like Hamas to fire rockets from a place where they have hostages, hoping that the retaliatory strikes will cause the hostages to be killed. uh, so that they can try to blame that on Israel. We're also going to talk some more about the tragic killing of the medics that happened. It actually happened a couple weeks ago, but the story has been coming out over the last few days. We got some further developments in the investigation on that event, and it turns out that yeah, it's not nearly as bad as it sounds in terms of Israel committing war crimes or anything like that. It probably could have been handled differently, but it turns out that they were very justified in shooting at that convoy of ambulances, whether or not they had lights and sirens going. So we're going to talk more about that. I'll explain that whole thing in just a minute. First of all, the IDF is dramatically increasing its presence in Gaza. They have struck over 130 terror infrastructures and eliminated dozens of militants just in the last 24 hours. Some of those people that were eliminated, one of them was commander of, well, this was day before yesterday, the commander of the Mujahideen terror group. He was involved in the murder of the Bibas family. There's a guy named Saeed Ahmad Albad Al-Khari. He's the money changer for Hamas. That makes it very much more difficult for Hamas to be able to purchase arms and organize and pay their people and all that. And then there was a propaganda and psychological terror operative. Yes, they actually have people whose designated job is psychological terror. And that ought to tell you everything you need to know about Hamas right there. The fact that they have somebody with that job title. But this is a guy who was, his name is Mohammed Salah Mohammed Bardawil, and they smoked that guy. He's been instrumental in producing the very painful hostage propaganda films. Another one of those just came out over the last couple days. I'll mention that in just a second. It shows signs of life from two hostages, Bar Cooperstein and Maxim Herkin. Uh, so I'm not going to show that. I don't think that we ought to justify Hamas in giving them the satisfaction of causing pain and hardship to people in across Israel for that. Folks, we got about 2,000 people online, and I want to just remind you that we are putting up lots of extra content over at chuckholton.com. You can go there and subscribe and get early access to a lot of the videos that we put up. And we have a lot more planned. There's just so much coming down the pike. I'm just up to here. I'm just out of margin and may have to hire more people or something because this is getting to be, we just have so much content. A lot of good stuff that's in the pipeline coming out to you very shortly. So in Gaza, the IDF has gone in and significantly expanded the buffer zones around the edges of Gaza. And what that means is they go in, they give an evacuation warning to those areas that are closer to the fence. And their plan is to create a no man's land all the way around the edges of Gaza. And that is going to require them to destroy quite a few neighborhoods that were too close. And so they have expanded that. Every time those rockets get fired out of Gaza, the IDF is just expanding that buffer zone even further. They're taking over more ground in Gaza. And that means that the amount of land in Gaza that is going to be available for Palestinians to live on is continuing to shrink as time goes on. And so they evacuate those areas, then they go in and bulldoze those areas. And that's what they're doing right now. They have this new corridor that they're building called the Morag Corridor, which separates Rafah from Khan Yunis in the central part of Gaza. So Rafah's in the south, Khan Yunis is in the middle, and they're putting another corridor in, and that's because the Philadelphia corridor, which goes right along the border fence with Egypt, is there to stop the smuggling that takes place, the tunnels and everything. But they're realizing that if that's all they hold is just that strip of land right up against the border, well, they can build tunnels further than that and just build longer tunnels and still get contraband into Gaza through those tunnels, which what the Morag Corridor is meant to avoid. By building another corridor further in, that's going to segment, kind of further segment Gaza into pieces that they can more tightly control. And this is what the Palestinians are choosing right now by not giving up the hostages. They're choosing to lose land, they're choosing to lose control, and lose the ability to move about freely inside Gaza. And that is going to stay that way most likely for a long, long time, because that IDF just doesn't have any other choice. The IDF is now. Let's talk about the 15 aid workers that were killed in Rafah. Now, 9 of these aid workers. So if you recall, just to back up, there was a convoy of emergency vehicles that rolled up on an IDF ambush and was lit up by the IDF. All of the medics in those ambulances were killed, and their bodies were put in a shallow grave and covered up so that the dogs and animals didn't get at them. And then the IDF immediately let the UN know where they were and reported what had happened. That all happened immediately. So they did the right thing there. Now, the IDF investigation has turned up that at least 9 of the 15 medics were known Hamas terror operatives. And some of them were armed. And that's actually visible in the video. If you look very closely, the first couple guys that jump out of the vehicles when they get stopped are armed. They have long guns on them. So this incident, that right there, if 9 of the 15 were known terrorists and some of them were armed, they were also in an area where they weren't supposed to be, because that corridor, that road that they were on, if you were going to drive on that road, you were required to pre-clear your movement with the IDF because you'd be moving through their lines. And these people did not do that. They just rolled up on this thing at 4:30 in the morning at a very high rate of speed, which you can see on the video, with lights and sirens going on some of the vehicles, not all of them. And since they weren't cleared, look, the IDF has had far too many instances where Hamas terror operatives have used emergency vehicles to move their fighters around or even to attack the IDF from. And so what that does is it removes the protection from these emergency vehicles. I mean, they can't be expected to respect emergency vehicles if the terrorists are using them to attack you. And in this case, this convoy was not cleared to be on that road. And they just came barreling down the road anyway and rolled right up to this IDF ambush. The IDF lit them up from a distance. So some of the claims later on made by the Palestinians were that the IDF walked up to these medics and executed them gangland style in the back of the head and handcuffed their hands behind their back. It turns out none of that was true. They were shot from a distance, and UNRWA is saying, yeah, but they were all shot in the torso. They aimed at their heads. Yeah, that's how you're taught to aim when you're in the military. The military's never taught to aim at your legs, because you can be shot in the legs a whole lot and still be a threat. So center mass is how they aim. And they apparently are pretty good shots because they took out all these guys from a fairly significant distance. So that means that they, and again, these guys being in the wrong place where they weren't supposed to be, coming up on this ambush at a high rate of speed, unannounced, and then stopping and jumping out with weapons, then the entire convoy is a legitimate military target. That's all there is to it. So perhaps it could have been handled differently. There maybe these guys could have done something different, but I'm going to give the IDF the benefit of the doubt here because, number one, rule number one in this war is that all of the bad things that happen after October 7th are the fault of Hamas. Just none of this had to happen at all. I guarantee you there's not one IDF soldier who wants to be in Gaza, just like, oh, I just wish I could be in Gaza right now rather than be at home living in peace. Soldiers that have seen war don't want more war. They would love for the war to be over and go home to their families safely. And so all of the terrible tragedies that have happened in this conflict on both sides are the fault of Hamas and Iran, as it turns out. We'll talk about more of that in just a second as well. Since becoming the new IDF Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Ayel Zamir has been meeting with the families of the hostages every weekend. And he's giving them an update on the war and helping them understand how the IDF is making every effort to recover and rescue the remaining hostages. There are 59 remaining hostages who they believe are still alive, and they're doing everything they can to get them out. But there are still protests going on in Israel. And I saw one that was on Fox this morning with Trey Yingst, where the father of one of the hostages got up at this gathering, this protest, where they were stopping traffic again in Tel Aviv, and got on the microphone and said, the only possible solution, the only thing we should do is just give up and leave so that we can get our people back. That's the only way to get our people back. So he's not willing to see Israel victorious if it means the loss of his own son. I don't know how I would react if it was my son in there, but I hope that I would be a little more patriotic than that. I'm not going to criticize the grieving father whose son has been held for 549 days in Gaza, but it's unfortunate to see that there are people who are wittingly or unwittingly assisting Hamas and making it harder for the IDF to complete the task at hand. And when they do that, they draw this whole thing out and they make it even more likely that more people would be taken hostage in the future. So it's unfortunate to see, but there's a small minority of people in Israel who think like that, who want, look, let's just give up. Let's just give Hamas whatever they want, as long as they promise to give back our hostages, please. It's just, and what that does is just guarantees that there's going to be more war. So now Iran has placed its military on high alert following the United States threats of more airstrikes on Iran if the negotiations to dismantle their nuclear program don't go anywhere. Tehran has said several times since President Trump sent them the letter asking for negotiations that they would not negotiate directly with the United States and they will not be giving up their nuclear program at all. They also added today that if the United States attacks, Iran will seek to get a nuclear weapon, to produce a nuclear weapon. They also warned all of their neighbors in the Gulf, including Iraq, Kuwait, the UAE, Qatar, Turkey, and Bahrain, not to assist the United States in any way, shape, or form in allowing use of their airspace by the United States and Israel, on helping the United States and Israel to shoot down Iranian missiles, et cetera, and said that anybody that helps the United States or Israel in any way will be considered an enemy of Iran, and Iran will attack them as well. Now, keep in mind that Iran has said this multiple times before. In last year, the two attacks that happened out of Iran that were thwarted in large part because of the assistance of countries like Jordan and Saudi Arabia and the United States and others. Uh, they, they said at that time the same threat. If any of those countries help America and Israel, they will be considered enemies and will be attacked. But Iran did not attack them. So I believe that Iran doesn't have a lot of credibility in this space right now. And whatever they're threatening to do to Iraq, Kuwait, the UAE, they're just all like, yeah, whatever. Now, for their part in Iraq, the United States has been quietly, this is kind of breaking news here. The United States has been quietly having discussions with the government in Iraq, which is a Shiite government friendly to Iran, and telling the Iraqis, look, if there are attacks on US bases that come out of Iraq from these Iranian backed militias, the Hashishabi militias in Iraq, the United States will consider the Iraqi government to be complicit, and we will attack Iraq. And so, amazingly, some of these Iranian-backed militias have come forward and said, we don't want to be a part of this, and we are willing to disarm to show our good intentions and get rid of our weapons if you promise not to attack us. Like, just so you know, we had nothing to do with it if you get into it with Iran. That's pretty interesting. And what it shows to me is that the Iraqi government is putting back channel pressure on the Hashishabi and telling them, if you attack American troops from Iraqi soil, our government is going to get whacked. And we don't want to go through that again. We don't want another shock and awe in Baghdad. And so you better stop. And these Hashishabi are actually listening. And they don't want to get smoked either. So they see the buildup of forces. We've got now probably 40,000 extra troops in the region. President Trump has actually floated the idea of sending U.S. Marines into Yemen. This just came out, and I don't think that there'd be a lot of stomach for that across the United States. Well, you tell me, would you be in favor of President Trump sending troops into Yemen? Actual boots on the ground. Now, as a caveat that, we actually do have some troops in Yemen right now. Very, very few special forces troops are in there training, doing training exercises with the legitimate Yemeni forces, not the Houthis. And so all of Yemen is not controlled by the Houthis. They only control an important part, the most important parts of the country. There are the remaining parts of the country are controlled by the legitimately elected Yemeni government, and we actually have troops in there helping them. But well, I'm talking about, would you be in favor of the United States sending U.S. Marines to land on the shores of Yemen and invade Yemen and occupy Yemen? Would you be okay with that? I don't think a lot of Americans would be, but it looks like some of you guys are not a lot of Americans. I see some people saying no and some people saying yes. But, if you asked the U.S. Marines themselves, if you went and did a poll, this isn't how the military works, but if they did, just send out a poll of all of the Marines that are floating around on ships out there right now or sitting in bases doing nothing, and said, would you rather keep sitting here doing nothing, being a target, or would you rather strap up and go into Yemen and take out these jokers yourselves? I think most of them would probably be on board. They'd be like, this is what I signed up for. Send me. I know that I would have if I was a soldier. Obviously, that's the reason we don't just set the military loose without civilian oversight. You don't want military leaders making those kinds of decisions. You definitely want civilian leadership overseeing the military. And that's what we have in America, so that's good. But I think there are a lot of Americans that would say that would not be a popular move overall if President Trump just sent troops into Yemen. And as I've said, it's going to be hard to defeat the Houthis if we don't. So we're kind of in a dilemma there because this is a situation that's going to be real hard to bomb your way out of unless you are willing to strike them so hard that they beg you to stop. And again, you look at the history of warfare, that is how you stop a war for good. That's how you end a war. That's how you actually turn your enemies into your allies, is you beat them so badly that they beg you to stop and unconditionally surrender. And then you say, fine, okay, we'll stop, you stop, everything's, hunky-dory. So please hit the like button, folks. We got 5,000 people watching and only 1,252 likes as far as I can tell. So it does help YouTube to know that we've got lots of interest on this video, and their algorithm will then go show this video to other people around the internet. So there's your little advertisement for helping us grow the channel. Also make sure you are subscribed, because only about 40% of you who watch regularly are subscribed. It's weird that 60% of you who are regular viewers that keep watching are not subscribed to the channel. Like, it doesn't cost you anything. We're not going to spam you, but it does let YouTube know that this is a popular channel for you to subscribe, and that helps us be able to continue to bring you this kind of content. So there's that. Now, I'll get to your questions in just a minute. Thank you. Keep asking them, and I will scroll back through the questions as soon as I get through what I wanted to talk about. So Israel is preparing for potential Iranian retaliation attacks. Iran has said since last October that they were going to attack Israel again. After Israel struck back at Iran, I think it was the 26th of October when they did that, Iran said, a retaliation to your retaliation to our retaliation of your retaliation is coming at a time and place of our choosing. And so there is some talk that they believe Iran might be about to perform a preemptive strike before the United States gets involved on Iran. And so a second THAAD missile battery, that's a terminal high altitude air defense missile system from the United States that can shoot stuff down in space. And we already had one of those missile systems in Israel that's been assisting with the Houthi attacks, shooting down missiles from the Houthis since the war flared back up about a month ago. But now we've sent a second THAAD missile battery, and that means that there are more U.S. troops on the ground in Israel. So we now have probably 400 or 500 U.S. troops who are currently serving in Israel in a direct defensive capacity against Iranian or Houthi attacks. And a lot of people just don't realize that, but yes, we do. We've got Americans on the ground engaged in this war. There's another reason why I say that we're in World War III, folks. I mean, that's not going to look the same, but we're in World War III. The defense minister, Israel Katz, revealed evidence yesterday that from documents that were recovered in Gaza. They showed all these documents, and they were correspondence between Mohammed Deif and Yahya Sinwar and the Iranian Quds Force commander. And in those letters, Deif and Sinwar were asking the Quds Force commander for $500 million for Hamas, and they're promising that with that money, they would destroy Israel completely. That was their promise to Iran. And the documents show that Iran complied. So Iran was giving about $20 million a month to Hamas over 2 years. And the sole intended purpose of that money was to help Hamas attack and destroy Israel completely. So when you look back at October 7th, with the benefit of hindsight, you look at that and you go, what were those guys thinking? I mean, did they really think they were going to take over Israel by doing that? Well, apparently that was the plan. Now, maybe the plan didn't go off like they hoped, because they had hoped that their attack would be a catalyst for all of the other enemies of Israel in Lebanon and Syria and everywhere else to attack simultaneously. And that didn't happen. But that was the stated goal. And Iran, according to these documents, not only had knowledge of the attacks, but was willingly funding the attacks to the tune of $20 million a month. If there ever was a smoking gun that shows that Iran is behind these terror proxies, this is it. I mean, just last week, Iran, the Ayatollah came out and made a speech and said, we don't have proxies. All of those other organizations, the Houthis, the Hamas, Hezbollah, everybody, those guys are all acting on their own. We don't have anything to do with that. We're not puppet masters. They're not proxies. And he literally said that in a statement a week ago. And now we have documents that prove that exactly the opposite is true. And so, without a doubt, under international law, that would be an act of war against Israel by Iran. And that would justify military kinetic attacks against Iran by Israel and perhaps the United States. Now, there's a statistic I want to point out here that is very important. And it's something you're not seeing a lot in the news. But if you notice, there have been exactly 0 deaths of Israeli combat troops in Gaza since the fighting resumed about a month ago. And the number of troops that are in Gaza from the IDF, the amount of combat that's taking place, is at a higher level now than it was at any other point during the war. So just numbers wise, I mean, we say in the military that if you hang around the barbershop long enough, sooner or later, you're going to get a haircut. There should be, just statistically, there should have been 2 or 3 or 4, 5 Israeli soldiers being killed every day in Gaza over the past month of fighting. But there's been 0. And I want you to ask yourself why. Okay, this is probably the most important thing I'm going to say on this video today. Why is it that those troops that they're not losing Israeli soldiers like they were earlier in the war? The answer to that question is that the Israelis have changed their tactics to be able to essentially do their job from a distance. So what they were having to do before is they were having to go into each building and search each building and look for anything that would classify that building as a military target. Arms caches, tunnel entrances, fighting positions, storage of weapons, whatever. And if it is, then they would destroy that building. The problem was there were tons of booby traps, and a lot of, the more movement that they have to do to go into those buildings, the more they put themselves and their troops at risk. And look, urban combat is the worst form of combat. It's an extremely challenging, geometrically, it's a challenging environment just because you can get shot from so many different angles. And so they would get blown up by booby traps in these buildings. The buildings would come down on top of them. stuff like that, that get hit with RPGs and stuff as they were moving to the buildings, etc. And that's why they were losing the troops. Well, they're not losing troops like that anymore, because now what they're doing is they're flying a drone into the building, looking around with the drone, and then if and when they determine that that building is a military target, they don't have to go up to the building to wire it up with explosives now. They are just shelling it from a distance and destroying the building from a distance, from a safe distance. Why are they able to do that now? Why didn't they do that before? See, this is the important question. Well, the reason is because the Biden administration wouldn't give the IDF enough weapons that they need with that kind of standoff capability. We're talking about JDAMs, joint defense attack munition, JDAM. JDAMs are just like a handheld missile that you can launch, or it can be launched from an airplane or a helicopter or whatever. And a JDAM will pancake a building. Just kaboom! You've seen that over and over and over again in the footage coming out of Gaza. So now what they can do is fly a drone in there, determine that it's a military target, and then just fire a JDAM at it or whatever, because they have a lot more JDAMs, because they have a lot more of the munitions that they need to do their jobs safely. And the reason that they were losing so many soldiers, they've lost 481 soldiers so far in the fight inside Gaza. And the reason for that was because, in large part, the United States under Joe Biden was not allowing the Israelis to have the munitions that they needed to do the job. And we're not talking about giving them munitions for free. Israel is willing to buy the munitions that they need from us. But even with them standing there ready to buy that ammo, the United States under Joe Biden was not giving it to them. And so, without a doubt, the Biden administration has blood on its hands, of the blood of IDF soldiers who died because they had to jury rig something to try to get the job done, rather than using the tools that would have been available to them had the Biden administration given them the permission to just buy the weapons they needed. So if you don't remember anything else from this video, that is egregious on the part of the Biden administration. And you should definitely share this video with your friends and on your social media, so that more people will know, because the mainstream media is not reporting this. But it's just, again, kind of what I try to do here with my own 22 years of experience of traveling around to war zones, being in the military, is that, reading between the lines of combat, it's very plain that the IDF would have been using these techniques much sooner had they had access to the munitions they needed, but they didn't. And so that's crazy. Folks, we got 6,000 people online. And so I want to just remind you again to go to chuckholton.com, and the videos that we're putting up, like of our trip to Iwo Jima, Guam, and Tinian, Saipan, last week, all the stuff we were doing, our trip to Thailand, the videos we're putting up are going up first on chuckholton.com. And so you can see them there first, and then after a few days, we'll put them up over on YouTube. So you need to be a supporter over there at chuckholton.com, locals, to be able to do that. And man, we got a lot of good stuff coming. We're going to be doing another retreat. We have a retreat that's going to be starting here in Panama on the 17th of this month. So just in a week or so, 10 days. We've got about 20 people coming that are all Hot Zone viewers who signed up to come to our hometown here in Panama, up in the mountains, and chill out with us for a week. It's not going to be a crazy, go, go, go kind of tour. This tour is going to be a lot more relaxed, and we're just going to spend time together and hang out and discuss the issues, go see the Panama Canal, and get to do some hiking and just, off gas here. And I'm really looking forward to that. It's going to be really fun to have an excuse to stay home. But we're going to do another one of those in West Virginia in November. I think probably the first week of November, we're going to do a retreat there at Maple Fork Lodge, which is a beautiful resort, so to speak, of, it's a big log cabin and property that we have there. And so we're going to do some training. If we that particular event, we're going to be able to do some training with some tools. If you want, we're going to do some medical training, stop the bleed and things like that. Just refresher stuff. We're going to talk a lot about personal and family and home security. And so we'll be able to look at your specific situation and give you some pointers on how to make you and your family safer in the United States with what's to come. And so if you would like to be a part of that, just send an email to info@holtonnews.com, info@holtonnews.com, and we will get you on the list. Okay. And I'll be putting out more details about that coming up shortly. And I'll be there with Connie. It'll be a great time. We'll have a really good time and see the fall foliage out there is gorgeous that time of year. And I'm really looking forward to meeting some more hot Zonians. Okay, so let's go back to the Houthis. They launched yet another attack that they claimed at Tel Aviv. It was intercepted by Israeli forces over the Dead Sea. So it made it into Israeli territory. It was a drone, and it didn't even set off alarms. This is the scary thing. It made it from Eilat all the way up over the Dead Sea before it was intercepted and didn't set off any alarms. That's kind of bad. The Houthis said that they attacked the Harry S. Truman yet again, sunk the Harry S. Truman. I think we're up to like 19 times that the Houthis have claimed to have attacked the Harry S. Truman. But the Harry S. Truman didn't notice. They didn't see anything happen. So apparently they missed. I don't know. For their part, though, the Harry S. Truman conducted 6 airstrikes on Houthi-controlled areas in the northern part of Yemen, in Sada and Hajj provinces, April 7th. Don't have any casualties counts or anything out of there, and wouldn't believe them if we did. Okay. Up in Lebanon, April 7th, the IDF killed Mohammed Adnan Mansour. He's a Hezbollah artillery commander who was responsible for attacks on Israel. That follows an earlier strike that targeted 2 Hezbollah operatives who were attempting to rebuild they called it terror infrastructure. It must have been a bunker or a fighting position or a launch site or something like that. But they were on a piece of heavy machinery and were working to rebuild something that had been destroyed by Israel, and Israel destroyed it again with those guys in it and took out those 2 Hezbollah operatives. Recently on Friday, the IDF also eliminated Hassan Farhat, the commander of the western sector of Hamas in Lebanon. He was responsible for rocket launches towards Safed back in February of 2024, in which a IDF sergeant was killed, Omer Sarah Benjo, female sergeant from the IDF, was killed there. So, what that tells you is the Mossad is still very much at work inside Lebanon because they're able to find these targets, fix these targets, and finish these targets in short order. And they're continuing to go down that target list and take out bad guys who definitely have a desperate need to have a sudden, unexpected, rapid disassembly take place in their person. The IDF also struck 2 other. No, I'm sorry, I already got that. IDF troops in Syria are experiencing increasing attacks. So far, the IDF troops that are in Syria, they're about 15 kilometers or 7 miles from the Israeli border. They've pushed out and formed a sort of safe zone, right? A buffer zone inside Syria, and they plan to hold it and keep it for the indefinite future. But they've been also raiding and going into, with ground troops, some military bases that belong to the old Bashar al-Assad administration. And they've been confiscating things like tanks and armored vehicles and trucks and weapons and all sorts of stuff, taking all of that so that HTS can't get a hold of it. But in the past few days, they have seen more IDF troops actually being attacked, being ambushed in Syria. And so there's been a heavier fighting taking place up there. It hasn't gotten a lot of news because of all the news going on with Yemen and the stock market decline and all that stuff. Okay. In Judea and Samaria, there were at least 9 terrorists arrested in operations over the weekend. Uh, IDF troops located a stockpile of combat equipment, including weapons parts, magazines, and a large amount of ammunition. The IDF is really cracking down also on rock throwing going on in Judea and Samaria and the Hebron. There have been a real spate of people tossing large rocks off of overpasses onto passing Israeli vehicles. And the IDF is making arrests in those and trying to figure out who's doing that, putting a stop to that. That obviously, I mean, a rock thrown from an overpass is a deadly weapon without a doubt. Okay, so that is the majority of what I had for now. So let's go back and look at some of your questions. I saw there were a whole lot of questions. I'm going to scroll up as far as I can go. If you have a question that didn't get answered, ask it again right now. Put it in the chat, and I will do my best to get to it over the next couple of minutes. Okay, I'm looking. So it helps if you put your questions in all caps. Let's see here. Where does Iran get all of their money? Well, Iran is a very large country with about 40 million people. And so they get it from taxes, and they have oil. And so they sell oil, even though they're under sanctions. They've been selling a lot of oil on the black market, which most of that is being bought by China. And we have a whole podcast I need to do on the rising threat from China, because we've been saying for some time that China is expected to try to retake Taiwan in 2027 or early 2028. And now a recent report came out just today that said from a UK intelligence agency that says they believe that China might actually act in the next couple of months to take Taiwan. And that's just because of the craziness that's going on. If the United States attacks Iran, China might say, our perfect opportunity has arrived, because the United States is now busy fighting Iran. And then China hits the go button on their attempt to take out Taiwan. Question, where does Hamas soldiers come from? Who recruits them? Well, Hamas recruits them. And what they do is they go into the schools and villages and towns and neighborhoods across Gaza. And they go to each and they say, we need 50 fighters from this neighborhood. Provide us with 50 fighters and we won't start shooting people in the kneecaps. That's their recruiting slogan. Give us fighters and we won't shoot you in the kneecaps. So they say, replaced all of their combat losses to date. The IDF says that they have killed approximately 18,000 Hamas fighters since the war began. And Hamas says, no problem, we just recruited 18,000 more young men. There are a lot of young men in Gaza, probably about 1 million young men in Gaza who could be pressed into service to fight for Hamas, and that's where they get them. Why are the A-10s being sent in? I haven't seen that there were A-10s being sent in, but if there are, that would be a smart move. My understanding is that we were retiring all of our A-10s, and we finally had gotten rid of all of them, put them in mothballs. But A-10s are irreplaceable at this point. There is no combat platform that the United States has at its fingertips that can perform the function that an A-10 can perform. An A-10 is called a Warthog. It's basically a giant flying machine gun, and it's a 30 millimeter Vulcan cannon. So it's got, I think, 12 barrels, I want to say, like a Gatling gun in its nose. and the entire plane is built around that big Gatling gun, and it fires depleted uranium bullets that can go through tanks. And these things are lethal. They are so lethal. And they're the infantryman's best friend. Trust me. I've been on the ground and I've watched these things in action. They've saved my bacon before in combat. And I can tell you, it is a sight to behold. These things come flying up. They go straight up over your head. They flip over upside down, and then they come down upside down so that the pilot can spot the target, can like see the target, and they just go raw, and it sounds like the whole sky is ripping open when those things start firing, and they will just put some serious hurt on anything they touch. But the United States has been saying for a long time they were going to get rid of them. Last I heard, they had gotten rid of them. If you saw that they are um, bringing them back, I would appreciate a link. Put it in the chat here or send me an email because I'd like to read about that. It'd be that'd be big news if they're bringing back the A-10s, and they should. Pete Hegseth has been doing a lot of really good stuff with the U.S. military, and so it wouldn't surprise me if Pete Hegseth said, "You know what? We need that A-10. You get those things back online." Okay. So yeah, if you see the A-10 Warthogs going in, I just haven't seen those being deployed. Uh, my understanding is that they expected the F-35 to take that role, but the F-35 can't do what an A-10 can do. It's just not the same. It's just way different. Um, it's like trying to get a rhino to do the job of an. I'm sorry, trying to get an elephant to do the job of a rhino. It's just not. They're yeah, big animals, but the similarity is not enough for a elephant to be able to pass as a rhino. That's what A-10s are. Okay, let's see here. I am not a fan of Trump sending troops into Yemen. Okay, a lot of people, some people are and some people aren't. I'm surprised how many people are in favor of sending troops in to Yemen. That's pretty amazing. So go ahead and ask your questions. Let's see here. Chuck, how old are you? You have a lot of gray for appearing to be so young. I'm 55, almost 56. And I just look so young because of all the clean living. And no, because I'm married to a Norwegian, and Norwegian wife equals happy and stress-free life. I'm sorry. Sorry. Honey, I tried to say that with a straight face. I just couldn't. I couldn't do it. I tried. Definitely a happy life. I don't know about stress-free. Okay. Is there a deadline on when an attack would happen if Iran doesn't sit down for diplomacy? Yeah, it's in about a month. They've got about a month left to make a decision to sit down. And if they don't, President Trump says that we're going in. It's going to happen. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. I will make a compact version of this live. Mike, looks like Mike asked. Right after this live is over, I will record and upload a condensed version of this live. Okay. Let's see. Go down here. Please don't forget to give us a like. Yep, we need that. I'm going on vacation with my family, says Chris Hastings, to Uluden's Turkey in July. Do you think it's safe for Americans? Not really. Turkey's not super safe. Make sure that there's nothing on any of your social media profiles that could be even remotely construed as negative toward Turkey. As a matter of fact, if you're subscribed to this channel, you should probably unsubscribe before you go, because they will look through everything. They have been known to make you turn over your phone, and they search through your phone and look at your social media. And they are very, very, very strict, very bad about jailing Americans or Westerners, especially if you have said anything bad about Turkey. That's why I really can't go through Turkey anymore. because I've done a lot of negative reporting on Turkey. And so there's that. Okay, Robert Hall's still asking about the A-10s. Okay, I got that. Let's see. Does the U.S. have boots on the ground in Iran or Syria? I can't imagine. I hear that the U.S. military has ships on the ocean in the Middle East. Of course we do, Laura. Yes, we do have ships in the ocean in the Middle East. We do have troops on the ground in Syria. We do not have troops on the ground in Iran, but we do have troops still in Iraq. And so there are about 40,000 U.S. troops arrayed around the Middle East in places like Kuwait and Bahrain and Qatar and the UAE and Israel, et cetera, Saudi Arabia even. But we don't have any in Iran. There are no U.S. troops in Iran. Jeff asks, will Taiwan be able to put up a fight against China like how Ukraine is putting up a fight against Russia? Yes. Taiwan has been preparing for this for a long time. Taiwan is a very mountainous region, and so they will probably lose the western-facing side of Taiwan because that would be pretty easy for China. That's the side that faces China, trying to come across and invade there. But if they can get up into the mountains, there's a good chance they can hold out for a long time. The real question is, can they get resupplies? Because what China, I'll do a whole podcast on this, but China will most likely try to blockade Taiwan first, perhaps, and blockading them would make it more difficult for them to survive long term. But we'll just have to wait and see. I'm going to do a whole podcast about that, so I don't want to go too far into that. What demotion are you, brother? Do you mean denomination, Dr. Knockers? Do you mean what denomination am I? I follow Christ, and that's it. That's it. I follow Christ. I read the Bible and I follow Jesus. And so that's my denomination. Question I heard Melissa asks, Egypt is on the border of Gaza and Sinai with military equipment. Why? Egypt has been building up forces in the Sinai. You know, the Sinai is part of Egypt, right? And you know, Egypt has a border that touches Gaza. Under the peace treaty that Egypt has with Israel, they are required to keep troops out of that region to some extent. They're allowed to have some troops in there, but not over a certain threshold. I don't know what that threshold is. Israel reports that Egypt has been building up forces in Sinai above the threshold set out in the peace treaty and has more troops and more tanks and more equipment in those areas. But more concerning than that, because those things can be taken out of there very quickly. So it's, you know, they've got troops in there. We put pressure on Egypt. Egypt can take those out. But more concerning is that Egypt has been building military infrastructure in Sinai against that treaty. So that doing things that the treaty says they can't do, like building runways and military bases and stuff like that. Those are much harder to remove. And what we may be seeing is a slow motion breakdown of the peace treaty between Egypt and Israel. We'll just have to wait and see. But I believe that Egypt was building up those troops on the border because they started doing that when President Trump started talking about pushing all of the Palestinians into Egypt. And the Egyptians are like, oh, heck no, we're not taking 2.5 million Palestinians. And so they started building up troops on that border as a show of force to discourage any pushing into Egypt. That may still end up happening. We will have to wait and see. Egypt is actually beholden to the United States in a lot of ways. We basically pay Egypt to be friends with Israel. And so their economy's in pretty bad shape already. I don't know if they can afford to lose that assistance from the United States. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars a year given to Egypt for their military specifically. Question, do you know if the Eisenhower being deployed to join the rest of the ships in the Indian Ocean, or is it still being refitted? No, the Eisenhower has been sent to, if I remember right, they did send the Eisenhower to the Gulf or to the Middle East to assist with this. I believe it is one of the carrier groups we've got there. Uh, May heareth but don't understandeth. Okay, sorry to hear about that. Do you know if? Okay, we got that part. Is Bali safe for vacation? Probably so. Question: should I be concerned about going to Canada in June? I mean, if you like visiting communist countries, go right ahead. It's not dangerous. The Canadians are the nice North Americans. They're not going to hurt you. It's just that the Canadians found out, much to their chagrin, when the events happened of 2020 and 2021, that they lived in a communist country and they didn't know it. And so everybody was just very kind of shocked by that, at least in where I live. I feel that the United States could take on Iran and China at the same time. What do you think? I think that would be hard, if especially if it was an all-out war. The thing about Iran is that, I mean, a war in Iran is going to take place in Iran. The more concerning thing is Iran activates some of its sleeper cells in the United States, and they start committing shenanigans all across the U.S. and just shut down the U.S. Look, folks, I really believe that it is only a matter of time until the United States is hit with what they call a massive multi-cell terror attack. Massive multi-cell terror attack is not a 9/11. It's not a mass shooting or something like that, like we've seen in the past. It's not a ramming attack that we've seen in the past. It is multiples of those things, sometimes perhaps even hundreds of those kinds of attacks, all happening at once and coordinated to absolutely bring the United States to a screeching halt. Attacks against power infrastructure, attacks against water infrastructure. Uh, Look, without a shadow of a doubt, Iran and probably North Korea, Russia, uh, all of our enemies have, China without a doubt, they have sleeper cells on the ground living in the United States. They're doctors and lawyers and physicians and what have you. Okay. And all they have to do is be activated. And if all of them are activated, if they coordinate a massive multi-cell terror attack in the United States, you're going to see chaos across the US like you've never seen in your lifetime. And this is, I believe this is a serious discussion. It's a serious risk that we face in the US. It is eminently possible for Iran to send 300 guys into the United States illegally and then have them all commit a mass shooting in 300 uh, cities across the country all at once. You imagine the kind of terror that would produce? I think it's only a matter of time before we see something like that happen in the US. And that's why I wrote the book, Death of Civilization. Folks, if you don't have a copy of my book, Death of Civilization, the whole purpose of that book is to describe in detail the threat that we face. And to the second half of the book is what you can do about it, how to make your family and your community more resilient in the face of a massive multi-cell terror attack in the United States. That kind of chaos takes place, you're going to need to have strong bonds with your neighbors. And so you can get a copy of that book. You can, as a free download, if you're a subscriber over at, a supporter over at chuckholton.com. So go to chuckholton.com, become a supporter over there. You can download a copy of that book. Or you can buy it off Amazon if you like and get it yourself. We just completed a giveaway where we gave away 10 copies of, we did a drawing for 10 copies of that book. And Amy was supposed to give me a list of the people who won for me to read off in this chat, and I don't see it. So Amy, if you're watching, please send me that list now. There will be a post over at chuckholton.com very shortly, if it's not there already, that announces the winners. So if you were in the running for one of those giveaway books, a signed copy, go to chuckholton.com and look at that post and find out if you won. I guess I don't know where the list is, but anyway. Somebody's asking, don't you think you're letting too many cats out of the bag in your podcast? Folks, let me make something very, very clear to you. I do not give away classified information on my show. I am not giving you anything that is not open source available on the internet. Okay. Now, I may be in my commentary, reading between the lines, helping you get a fuller understanding of what's going on. But in so doing, I'm not giving away anything that is not already out there. I'm not giving away, any tactics, techniques, procedures, timelines, people, nothing. I don't tell bad people things they don't need to know. And I see these comments once in a while where people are saying, I can't believe you're saying all this. You're telling all the enemy everything. No, look, there's nothing that I'm giving you that the enemy doesn't already know. Okay. So I hope that puts your mind at rest. All right. So somebody retracted their question there. Are there prisons in Gaza? Would it be possible to, can't read. Go away. Dadgummit. Are the prisons in Gaza? Would it be possible to deport or send the Tesla firebombers to Gaza prisons? No, they'll go to prisons in the United States. They're not going to go to prisons in Gaza. That'd be fun, but no. And we wouldn't even need to send them to prison. We just airdrop them into Gaza and be done with it. Will Canada also be attacked by the sleeper cells? Well, they very well could be. There certainly are. I mean, Canada has made it much easier for people from places like Iran to get into their country over the past 10, 15 years. And you have a sizable community of extremists in your country already. That's one of the big concerns, is one of the reasons why President Trump put tariffs on Canada, because we have 4,000 miles of border with Canada, and we don't have enough Border Patrol agents to cover all of that area. The last I checked, we had one agent covering every 30 miles of border. So it's a foregone conclusion that if these extremists that Canada has allowed in on visas into their country want to come to the United States, they can do so without too much problem at all. And that's a serious issue. So could those attacks happen in Canada? Certainly they could. And so you want to get a copy of that book, folks. Go to chuckholton.com, become a supporter. You can download a free PDF of that book there and my other books that I'm working on. I've got 11, 12 books in print now, something like that. And not all of them are available as a free download over there, but we do run promotions from time to time where we will give you a audio version of the book or something like that. I want to ask one more question before we go. Of all of the books that I have published, those of you who know any of them, which one would you like to see a free audiobook download of on chuckholton.com? More Elite Soldier, Bulletproof, Making Men, Prowess, some of the novels that I've written, the most recent book, Death of Civilization. Which one of those books would you like to see a free audible, like an audio book download of? Because that's one thing that we're considering doing in the near future. Okay. All right. I think that is it. Well, there's another question. Will Turkey and Israel actually go toe to toe with each other? Well, we don't know, Rudy. It's hard to say. We don't want to see that for sure. And Israel has been trying to take steps to keep that from happening. But it certainly could happen. Either Prowess or Making Men, Christopher says. What about CCP in the US? Would they also attack us at the same time from within? Well, it's a good question. Could they? Yes. Would they? I think China would be more likely to try to encourage someone else to do it. Everybody's saying making men bulletproof also. So President Trump and Netanyahu are meeting today in Washington, D.C. The International Criminal Court is losing its mind. Apparently, the ICC actually asked Hungary to arrest Netanyahu when he was there last week and turn him over for prosecution for war crimes. And Hungary said, yeah, no, not going to happen. Can we please pray for Trump and Netanyahu meeting? Let's all do that, okay? All right, so I'm going to put up a written summary of this live after the live is over on chuckholton.com. So all the points I made, all the news, they're in a easy to follow, tight summary is going to be in print there, and I'm going to record a 10-minute shortened version, condensed version of this live that I'll put up on YouTube shortly after I finish with the live. Okay, so those two things are going to happen. All right. With that said, let's. Would you, if you're the praying kind, just pray with me? The Bible says that when two or more are gathered in His name, that He is there with us. So let's pray together for wisdom for our leaders and Israel's leaders in this very perilous time. All right. Lord God, we come to you right now and we just ask, Father, that you would send your Holy Spirit to give discernment to President Trump and to Prime Minister Netanyahu as they meet together today and they seek to decide how to go forward and how to accomplish the objective of making the world a safer place from radical Islamic terror. Lord, I pray that you would just thwart the plans of evil men everywhere around the world. There are plenty of them to be thwarted. And I pray especially, the Lord, that you would just cause Iran to not be able to get assistance from any side, that none of their allies would come to their defense, Father, that they would be left completely on their own, and that the regime there would collapse under the weight of its own evil, and the people of Iran would rise up and would take back their country and make it a safe and peaceful place that will not be a threat to its neighbors any longer. Father, I pray that you would watch over the American servicemen and women who are deployed right now and deploying to harm's way in the Middle East and elsewhere. I pray that you would watch over them and just guard them with a ready sword and keep them safe, Father. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, thank you very much for watching, and I appreciate all of you. Again, make sure you're subscribed to this podcast. Please hit the like button